They tell you war is about what happens on the battlefield, but the deeper battle, the one that shapes history, often goes unseen. It begins not with explosions, but with patterns too large to recognize and too quiet to notice. A confrontation between two nations can ripple outward, unseen seams tearing open in distant capitals, corridors of power where influence and restraint are weighed in silence. This is not about who fired the first shot, it is about the invisible forces that make confrontation feel inevitable. When the United States and Iran moved toward direct conflict, it was framed in headlines as a clash of wills, sanctions, nukes, missiles, but beneath the surface lay strategic entanglements stretching from Tehran to Moscow. From Beijing to Washington, governments do not operate in a vacuum, they operate through networks, economic dependencies, military postures, diplomatic leverage, each an unseen lever that can tip a crisis into chaos. Iran's position in the Middle East has long been a source of tension, its nuclear ambitions, its regional influence, its enmity with U.S. interests. These threads extend back decades. For the United States, Iran has represented both a geopolitical challenge and a test of American power, but here is the subtle tension. In the shadow of this confrontation stood two other actors quietly shaping the stakes, Russia and China, not proxies in a battlefield sense, but strategic anchors, whose interests, fears, and ambitions reshape the frame of every decision. For Moscow and Beijing, Iran is both an ally and a tool in a broader contest with the West. Their ties are often described not as a deep alliance, but as a tactical partnership, convened around shared resistance to U.S. pressure and sanctions. They share platforms in diplomacy and economics, and at times, they exercise their power, for example through vetoes in international institutions, to shield Tehran from punitive measures. This is a critical but overlooked axis of influence, the way distant capitals can offer political cover, economic lifelines, and strategic reassurance to a state under pressure. No soldier marches under their flags, yet their presence alters every calculation. When the prospect of a U.S. military operation against Iran emerged, not as theoretical, but as a real option, Pentagon leaders warned of its risks: depleted munitions, stretched forces, limited allied support, unpredictable regional backlash. Such warnings are not public theater. They are the quiet signals of systems under strain, the mechanics of power revealing themselves in cautious language. On the other side of the globe, both China and Russia publicly urge restraint, narratives that echo calls for diplomacy, even as they deepen military coordination with Iran in certain theaters. What pattern emerges here? Not a simple alliance chart, but a complicated web of incentives, deterrence, projection, influence, ambiguity. Imagine a chessboard where every piece moves in response not only to your choices, but to the anticipated responses of others you cannot see. Iran's strategic geography, for example the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point through which a significant portion of the world's oil flows, is not just a tactical concern, it is a lever in a system where economic anxiety, military calculus, and political signaling intersect. The crisis here is not isolated to one region, it refracts through markets, alliances, domestic politics and the narratives that bind them. But in all this talk of build-up and brinkmanship, there is a silent question: what would the involvement of global powers really mean, not in grandiose terms, but in the everyday realities of decision-making? Would a nation like China intervene overtly on behalf of Tehran, or would it use diplomatic channels and economic influence to shape outcomes favorable to its own rise? Would Russia commit beyond rhetoric? Or would its actions be calibrated to extract leverage, not escalate beyond control? Notice what is missing: a clear roadmap, definitive outcome, or certitude about who would act and how. Reality is rarely so binary. This is the invisible architecture of contemporary conflict. Not the dramatic clash of titans, but the subtle realignment of incentives and deterrence, of pressure and counterpressure. Most of the world watches leaders exchange warnings, fewer see the invisible structures of power shaping each word, and yet, within those structures, the greatest threat is not the clash of arms, but the collision of assumptions, assumptions about strength, assumptions about resolve, assumptions about the limits and reach of influence. These assumptions can become self-fulfilling. They can make crisis seem inevitable, not contingent. They can make distant capitals feel closer than they are, and in that perception, even diplomacy can feel like another arena of conflict. So the question is not merely what happens next, but how we think about the forces that drive nations toward conflict, what unseen currents are shaping decisions, what unanswered questions remain beneath every public statement, what patterns are emerging beyond the headlines. Look for the lines that are not drawn on maps, the economic dependencies, the strategic calculations, the unspoken thresholds of escalation. Every viewer watching this now also participates in those ripples, in how we frame, question, and understand. Connect the dots not as conclusion, but as inquiry. Turn the unsettling into the insightful, and consider this: the most important question in any crisis may be the one no one is asking. What assumptions are we carrying, and what happens if they are wrong?